Hello and welcome to Gardening Australia. Grab the whistle and blow time on, because we've got everything you need to get out there and into it this week. Here's what's coming up. Tammy gets an orchid back to its best.
I feel like I can breathe again.
I have a seedy garden, and I also believe that weeds should be kept firmly in their place. I'll show you how to keep discipline so that your garden doesn't become a nuisance in the neighbourhood.
Our new guest presenter, Jac shows us how to plan a garden.
I really want all the flowers, all the foliage to really pick up the golden hour light as the sun sets.
And we meet an artist and photographer showcasing nature's rich tapestry.
Probably 80% of elements that I'm working with in an artwork are from the bush, and they're still in the bush.
Jane has uncovered a grand garden with stunning views, cottage flowers, water features, and of course, lots and lots of plants. Take me there now.
Here in the beautiful Upper Yarra Valley, about an hour east of Melbourne, the stunning Yarra Ranges provide the perfect backdrop to this 5-acre garden. For almost 20 years, it's been home to gardener and broadcaster Virginia Haywood.
I love being outside, I love experimenting, and I love here bringing the birds, bringing nature, keeping the dogs away from the blue tongues.
So how would you describe your garden?
I suppose it's a cottage garden gone topsy-turvy. A cottage garden is meant to be small.
Yes.
And it's not.
Making the most of the large space, Virginia has also included some water features. So this is a smaller pond.
So I put this in first, and it was to bring the frogs. I wanted frogs.
Yeah.
And now I've got at least 4 different sorts, which of a night time you can hear is absolutely wonderful.
Well, I tell you what, the Viminaria there, that loves a watery spot.
It's very happy and it gets into the view.
Yeah.
And so we have this constant fight with it. I cut it, let it grow up, let it flower, then think it's ruining the view.
Cut it off
Cut
with
it.
the socks again.
But I have a lot of yellow in here, and I was just having yellow and pink, and I've got a complete mix of natives and exotics.
And you like that, don't you, mixing up the
People
two?
say to me, have you got a native garden? I say, no. Oh, you've got an exotic garden? No. You know, I have heaps of both. When I get a plant, I don't actually read its passport. If it's beautiful, I want it. If it's unusual or rare, I want it. My first question when I plant a plant, how will it take the north wind? That's my first question. My second question is, does it want sun or shade? You know, but my first question is the north wind.
We have come on the best day to see this beautiful dogwood. Oh.
It is rather stunning, isn't it? I've got 3 of them in here, and I planted all these trees because it's the south side of the house and I could get some woodland plants in. There was nothing here except grass and weeds. But during the drought, I did have trouble with the dogwoods. And if it really comes back, I'm not sure whether they'll last. They're definitely not a tree to plant for 2090.
No.
Because they don't like the heat and they hate the dry. But at the moment, this one is beautiful.
These flowers of the dogwood are quite extraordinary, aren't they? They're different.
Yes, of course. We forget that some of our best flowers are actually bracts. They're not flowers. The flowers are much, much smaller, and these develop around the flowers. And yes, these are bracts. In this section of the garden, I've got lots of smoke bush. This one was actually here before I came, which was fabulous. Probably the best tree in the garden, aside from, of course, the eucalypts. But I have since planted another 6 or 7.
Yes, I can see them over there.
There's over here, and there's some down the driveway.
Now, the beauty of the smoke bush is that the flower looks smoky as it sort of flowers like that.
Stunning.
But look at those leaves.
And they change colour in autumn. and then they disappear over winter. And I like the sun to come through in winter.
Yeah.
I want a lot of my trees to give me summer shade and winter sun.
Well, these are very spectacular. Really, as a contrast, this is where you're using the colour combinations really well.
So I'm really trying for orange and purple here, whereas the next garden bed is orange and pink.
And it's in layers too.
Yes.
This is the tall one, then you've got the medium shrubs and then the low one.
And the low tends to be blue and purple,
Yeah.
which is excellent because it's cooling.
Yeah. Look at that clematis up there, that's pretty cool.
That clematis is absolutely fabulous, isn't it?
It's beautiful.
Very
Right up the
dark
tree.
purple, just the colour for in this bed.
Oh, it's lovely. The mix of plants reflect well-travelled Virginia, who left Melbourne for London in the mid-1970s.
I went on holidays and just stayed. I didn't intend to. The last 10 years I worked at the House of Commons, so that was really good fun. And then I came back to look after my father, who used to broadcast on the ABC.
A tennis commentator.
And footy.
Yes,
He did the
remember him
footy.
well.
Doug Hayward, he did the footy for years.
Yeah.
And I think probably because I brought my daughter, he lived longer than I expected, and by the time he died, she'd turned into an Australian.
So here you are.
So here I am.
When she's not gardening, Virginia is a broadcaster on Community Radio's 3CR's long-running gardening show.
Because we have a different group on every week, we have different experts every
Yes,
week.
which
Makes
is
it a
good.
very good radio show.
Yep.
I'm a guide at the Botanic Gardens, which I've been doing for 20 years now. We have a small organisation called Plant Trust, which is about conserving garden plants because we can't bring them in like we used to.
Yes.
We don't want them to disappear.
No. So people who've got an ornamental collection of plants can put that onto the register.
Yes, we
It's good.
try and get people to be conscious of what they're growing, and if they're growing a whole lot in one genus,
Yes.
to protect it.
And you've got a good climate to grow things in the Yarra Valley.
I have got red soil. Ooh. So it's clay, it's got goodness in it. So yes, and I have a higher rainfall than Melbourne, and I'm higher than Melbourne.
Yes.
So all these things work in my favour.
What's the most unusual plant you've got in your garden? I know there's a lot to
There are
choose
so
from.
many.
Yeah.
One thing we happen just to be walking towards now is the asafoetida. Asafoetida is a herb, spice, that you use all the time in both Middle Eastern and Indian cooking.
I use it a lot when I'm making curries. Do you?
Exactly, yes, I do. And it's because it has a garlic onions type flavour. And it's called ferula. It's first cousin to fennel.
But it's perfect, isn't it? And it's got a funny smell. Fertita meaning funny smell,
yes.
But I love those umbel flowers. I'm glad to see it in your garden, though. It's wonderful. Oh, thank you.
The other thing I think is important is I've got lots of grass, which is really boring in terms of the lawn mowing. But you need the void.
Why? Is that design feature you
I
mean?
think you need your mass, you know, there's big garden beds all around us, but you need also, it's like the view, you need it framed. You need the garden beds framed by water or by grass so that the eye can rest while it moves. I had to somehow end the garden. Fence? Absolutely not. Hedge? Block the view. What am I going to do? There had been a dam here a long time ago, so I reinstituted it.
And it's lovely having the reflection of the clouds and the mountains in the background.
Absolutely.
Oh, it's lovely. Now, you've got a good mixture. You've got the kangaroo paw and the native mint.
So most of what's planted around here is native, but the exotics have just crept in.
Virginia may have given up her professional career as a political advisor in the UK, but she has embraced all aspects of her current plant life.
That big move from politics to plants means that I'm surrounded by plants people. Friends around here that I connect through the plants. I'm close to the Dandenongs. I've got very good friends up there, a number of whom are on the radio show with me. We swap plants, we help each other. It just is a whole dialogue, a whole way of talking to people that is just fabulous. So it's just all those different elements. It's the quiet, the peace. I love it. I want to go out of here in a box.
What a garden. Well, it's a big weekend for footy. And as you heard in that story, Virginia's father, Doug Haywood, not only called grand finals as a broadcaster for the ABC, but he also played in one back in 1948 for the Melbourne Demons. Oh, enjoy the footy, everyone, and may the best team win.
Is it okay to mulch over recently sown seed? Well, it depends on the type of seed. Large seeds, like these beans, you can put the thinnest veneer of mulch over the top because they have enough stored energy inside them to punch through. But with smaller seeds, like these brassicas, it's best to wait till they germinate and then carefully apply mulch around them. Now, you can prevent weeds from sprouting through mulching, so apply it thickly if that's your goal.
Are there any edible plants that chooks will leave alone? Chooks are great, but they're like fluffy little tractors and pretty destructive. There's not much they won't have a go at, but as a general rule, they'll avoid leathery plants like rosemary and oregano. If you want to grow food in an area that chooks have access to, it's a better bet to set up some portable exclusion cloches that you can drop over individual plants to protect them.
Why doesn't my mountain pepper produce any fruit? Well, that's a question to savour. The mountain pepper is one of the very best bush food flavours, at least in my opinion. And they're called Tasmania lanceolata, and that might make you think they're only from Tasmania, but they are across much of southeast Australia. And the foliage, well, it's peppery and can be used as a flavour. But to ensure you also get the edible berries, you need to grow 2 plants. That's because they're dioecious, meaning they have separate male and female plants. So you need a male and a female for pollination. And I promise you'll get some pepper.
Orchids like this don't mind being pot-bound, but they do benefit from repotting, and this can be necessary to help them thrive over time. The best time to do it is after they've finished flowering. Repotting can be done every 2 to 3 years, especially if the plant has outgrown the pot or the potting medium has broken down. And it's a good opportunity to remove any insects like ants that may have taken up residence and inspect the roots. No insects here, but I'm snipping off the roots that are well past it and those that are a knotty tangle.
Go. Feel like I can breathe again.
Check the bulbs. Now, these ones may look a bit sad and dead, but they're actually really firm, so we're going to keep them. I'm repotting into fresh orchid bark. And giving it a tap to settle the mix. Be warned, repotting your orchid can cause it to go into shock, so you may need to wait another year or so before it flowers. To finish off, I'm feeding with a premium orchid fertiliser. A little bit of a tidy makes for a happy plant.
If there's one thing I know about Jerry, he runs a tight ship. Not much gets past him, and he's not afraid to show his plants a little bit of tough love and keep them in line. But he's also a responsible gardener. And today he's going to show us how in the garden, a stitch in time can save 9.
I have a very seedy garden. The majority of the crops I grow come from seed I've saved myself. I also make my own compost, which contains seed, and I use that to improve my soil. That's a lot of seeds cycling around in my garden, which begs the questions, is my garden an uncontrolled weed patch, or am I a slave to my garden, or am I just a little bit nutty? Well, I'm hoping to disprove two of these things. Many of the crop plants that we depend upon for food have certain commonalities. They're dependable, easily grown from seed or division or cuttings. And next to me is one great example. It's the pigeon pea. Now, this produces really protein-rich seed. The young pods can be eaten green like snow peas. The flowers are powerfully attractive to native bees, and if there's a famine, then the leaves can be used like spinach. In certain parts of the world, it can grow almost like a weed. But I didn't sow this. It sowed itself from a plant I grew elsewhere in the garden. It's growing right next to the fence. So if I don't maintain this, the next stop could be my neighbour's garden. Most of our dependable and favourite food plants need to be managed. If you ask me what my worst weed is, I'd have to say the tomato, closely followed by eggplant. One of the earliest lessons I learned when I moved to the subtropics was that every single seed of eggplant and tomato that get put into the compost heap survive. And at one stage, my back garden was a forest of their seedlings. And that was a lesson I've never forgotten. Much though I love my compost, these fruit stay out of it. In terms of weediness, there's a complete spectrum with plants, starting with corn. This has been so modified by farmers, it looks nothing like its wild ancestors. And this wrapping that we take for granted, in fact, prevents the seed from self-seeding. So in terms of weediness, this has zero risk to the environment. And this is sesame. And the only reason you grow sesame is as a seed crop. But here in the subtropics, I've only got one window where I can grow this. I sow it in spring and harvest before the summer rains because it doesn't like our warm, wet, humid summers. It can survive as seed. If I miss any, they'll come up the next year. But they need a gardener to intervene by tilling the soil, turning it over, exposing the seed. So this could be classified as a weed of cultivation. Without cultivation, it disappears. Anybody who's grown basil will know that they can self-seed in the garden, but it too is a weed of cultivation. It doesn't like shade, it needs the soil to be disturbed in order for it to be able to spread. These are really easy to control. And growing next to the basil is bitter melon. Now, this is a different character, and it has the potential to be an environmental weed. The seed will germinate without the assistance of a gardener. So, if you're going to grow this plant, you really need to harvest all the fruit and have a few good recipes for using them. Well, firstly, I'm just going to snip one off and show you why I grow it. Bitter melon is a summer annual, and the fruit are delightfully bitter. This fruit is not full-sized, but you do need to eat them when they're green because they become toxic when they turn yellow. You prepare the fruit by scooping out the seed, and at this stage, when they're green, you can put that into the compost heap and they won't germinate. But once they turn yellow, don't compost them, because mature seeds of the yellow fruit will most definitely germinate and, via the compost, could spread all over my garden. The take-home message is, you need to understand this plant, its growth cycle, its potential to grow quickly and large, and its ability to grow in bushland if it's allowed to. So, if you're not going to put in the effort to grow this plant, don't grow it. This is Lagos spinach. In Australia, it tends to be grown as an old favourite in cottage gardens. I grow it as it was originally intended, as a spinach, a leafy green. I harvest the plants whole before even the first flower, before they become fibrous. I never let it go to seed. Each plant is capable of producing between 1,000 and 2,000 seed, so it's definitely a seedy plant. Grown like this in my garden, it presents absolutely no weed threat whatsoever. But left to its own devices in a cottage garden, it could indeed become a local weed. Lemongrass is familiar in many food and herb gardens. This one is East Indian lemongrass, and it's 20 years old. We've come to an arrangement. In winter, it produces very tall seed heads, and I'll collect a couple for seed for myself. The rest I'll cut off to prevent them self-seeding here. A few have escaped. I'll put them in the compost heap where they can rot without causing any further concern. Now, this is a rhythmic, cyclical effort that I do to contain what could become a local bushland weed. Now, if that sounds like too much work, then you could go for West Indian lemongrass, which is a different species. It's sterile, and you have to multiply it by division. So by substitution, you can avoid growing a weed in the first place and save some labour. This is my curry leaf tree, and it's a labour of love. It supplies all I need and the needs of 2 restaurants. The problem with this plant is it's a potential environmental weed, particularly in certain climate zones like the subtropics. And birds love to eat the fruit, and they spread the seed far and wide. So what you would normally think about doing is to remove the flowers to prevent the seed. And for a while, I struggled with this until I realised that when they produce the fruit, they send a chemical signal back to the tree. No need to flower anymore, so you only need to trim the fruit off once. And that was a labour-saving discovery which I've never read about in books. I trim the fruit off once a season. To maintain the height and spread, I prune it all over twice a year, making sure nothing enters my neighbour's garden. Every plant you bring back into your garden requires some sort of labour, so do your due diligence. Every local council maintains a list of undesirable, unwanted weeds. Check there. What is a weed in my climate zone may not be a weed in your climate zone. The big question each of us must ask is whether I'm prepared to put in the time or the effort to maintain a plant. In this garden, I maintain 140 different seedy crops, and so far, I think I'm winning. The future is not a predetermined destination. It's a consequence of the small, everyday decisions each of us gardeners make, and that will determine whether the future of Australia is weedier or less weedy.
Keeping goats is great for the resources they provide, including milk, manure, and of course love. But they also take lots of time and effort to make sure they're kept happy and content, which was a challenge with my busy work schedule. And so I had to find a new home for my girls, Jilly and Gertie. But after 6 goat-free months, I was ready to introduce more goaty goodness into my life. So I started asking around and established a goat share with 2 other households who lived nearby. And now we have the beautiful Clary and Flo, her daughter, in our lives. The goats are permanently based here. So our goat share system works with an online calendar to work out who does the feeding and milking on which day. Not only do we all save time, we also save money as we share all the costs. But the best thing is we all get to enjoy the many benefits of having local and ethical dairy in our lives. So if you haven't got time to have your own goats or even chickens, maybe try to reach out and find someone in your neighbourhood who is also super keen. It could be a win-win for everybody.
Still to come on Gardening Australia. Millie gives an old favourite a new look.
think this is going to enjoy being potted up and it's going to give me great results.
Clarence is making big moves.
A lot of them go into new builds and it gives that big impact from day one.
And we meet an artist capturing nature's bounty.
I wanted to celebrate what we do have and protect what we're losing.
Over the next few weeks, our new guest presenter, Jac is going to show us how to create a beautiful, showy garden. And because success is all in the planning, that's exactly where she's going to start today.
Over the next few weeks, we're going to cover everything about planting design, how to select plants, how to propagate a whole mass of them, and how you can even create beauty in small spaces so everyone can have a year of wonder, no matter what kind of garden you're growing in. But today, it's all about planning. I'm a maximalist. We want to cram all different kinds of plants, all different kinds of forms of plants, so that we can have this amazing kind of schedule of different flowers and interests throughout the whole year. When I first planted out my front yard, it was filled with perennials. They mainly flowered in the summer. This time, I want to experiment so much more. Add more bulbs, more Australian wildflowers, different kinds of annuals and succulents to really have much more wonder throughout the whole year. And I started by ripping it all up. Now, it looks drastic, but don't be alarmed. All these plants were lifted. They're going to elsewhere in the garden, to projects, to friends. We've collected seeds and cuttings, and so everything's going to be used. When you're first thinking about a planting design, it's great to really observe the garden, to spend some time in the space, to consider some of the natural parameters, some of the things that you want to keep in the space, and also thinking about how you're going to see it and use the space. Now, when I ripped everything out, there are some things that I left. I've left the magnolias, which are an incredible backdrop to the garden, the hedges that create some formal lines for all the wild planting that happens in between. There's an existing gravel pathway, and I marked out all of these bulbs with some bamboo stakes so I can see where they are when we do the planting. And there's some gorgeous grasses. They're really nice and established. They have lovely texture on the outskirts of the garden, so we've kept them. The other important thing to consider is the lines of beauty. So how you see across the garden, the different perspectives and views that you have on the garden. What will greet you when you come up the driveway? The conditions and size are also something you need to think about. So this is a typical garden front yard, about 6 by 10 metres. It's also important to think about your aspect. So how much sun the garden actually gets throughout the day. This garden is predominantly south-facing, but I still get a lot of sunlight because the garden's far enough away from the house. Once you've got a handle on the conditions, the next step is to really start developing that idea. For me, with this particular planting design, I really want to create something that is full of flowers, that's really complex, but that it's got a real softness to it as well. I really want, you know, all the flowers, all the foliage to really pick up the golden hour light as the sun sets and as the sun rises in the morning. There's particular colours that I really love and particular shapes of flowers that I want to use a lot of so that it really feels like an immersive space where I'm just surrounded by all these floating flowers. When I'm doing planting design, I consider colour, I consider shape, and I consider the phenology of the plant. So when it's flowering, when it's growing, I consider all of those things at the same time. But I think it might be a bit more simpler if we just think about colour first and then shape and how we can combine them together. When I think about colour, I really feel like it's one of the most important things in a garden. For me, like, colour is something that just brings everything to life. You can use colour in so many different ways, and it brings vibrancy, or if it brings softness, it can bring a whole planting together. It can create contrast. When it comes to developing your colour experience for your garden, I think it's really fun to create like a visual tool. Sometimes we call these mood boards, but there's different ways of going about them. I really like taking screenshots from my camera roll. I find that when I'm out in nature or in gardens, I've been drawn to particular colours, and so I can see those different themes come through in what I've documented on my phone. There's other ways as well. You can create like a physical mood board where you clip out all different kinds of colours and textures and things that you really feel drawn to, the things that you really, really love. And it's possible to also create like a digital pin board as well, where you get a whole collection of images and you really start seeing kind of an idea of colour come through it. I really love beautiful kind of autumnal colours. You know, the oranges, the burgundies, but also the lime greens. And I really love like mauves as well, and it's something that we see in the Australian bush a lot, together with yellows. And so I always think about the colours that I want to see at particular points in time. And there is a really lovely combination that I really want to explore in the garden this year. I got so inspired by this image in looking at all of the gorgeous Echinacea pallida, and it's fun to use some of your favourite plants, and Echinaceas are definitely one of mine, but how it just pairs so beautifully with this soft mauve in the background. And so I'm really taking a lot of inspiration from this kind of colour and how I can have a moment of that in my garden, but potentially, instead of using just these plants, use some Australian wildflowers to really make it happen. So to make it simple, for this planting in my front garden, I'm going to work with 3 main shapes. So larger things like the larger perennials like Cedar matrona that form lots of big mounds. And then I'm going to use a lot of plants that have a lot of floating flowers. They might be strappy, upright. Those flowers will come up through and they'll float above the remaining foliage. And then I'm going to have like a lot of filler as well. So lower grasses, ground covers that will use all the space in between these 2 different shapes. Now I've got a really clear idea of colour, I'm going to use shape and form to start building a plant list of those favourite plants and other plants that are really going to complement them. And as I do so, I'm also going to think about who else this garden is for. So those pollinators, the bees, the birds, all the other creatures that are going to live in my garden, I'm going to think about them and the kind of plants that they love too. So don't hesitate if you want to have a bit of a crack, rip something up and start your planting design again. Gardening and plants, it's all about fun, experimenting, really maximising all the delight and the wonder that you can fit into a space. So it doesn't matter whether you've got a really big front yard, something in the backyard, some pots, a little small corner. Why don't you explore what you can achieve with some beautiful plants all together in your home garden? Next time in my Designing with Plants series, I'll show you how to pick plants that will fill your garden year-round with colour, texture and, of course, beauty.
You can't get more long-term than a tree, and that's exactly what this is. It's the bay tree, Laurus nobilis, which we use as a fragrant herb to put into things like soups and stews. It's the leaves that you use, and they can be ginormous. In fact, I often walk the block. There's a few trees near here that are 2 or 3 stories high. I don't have space for that, but I do want the convenience of this flavour in the veggie patch. So what I'm going to do is actually pot up a tree. I've got this kind of wayward specimen, which I must admit, when I went to the nursery, I could have picked a nice compact plant, but I think this is going to enjoy being potted up and it's going to give me great results. So it's a fantastic time to pot almost anything up. And if it's as pot bound as this is, you've got to take a few steps. One is to root prune. So you can see I've got that pot already filled about, well, just over a third. And then I'm just going to check the depth of my plant. So a little bit more. Just get that height right. It's really important when you pot something up that you don't fill it right to that top surface, because when you water it, it'll just run off the edge. So you want to leave about, I don't know, 50 millimetres between the finished surface of the soil and the pot edge. I'm not worrying too much about this. It's not straight, obviously, because I'm going to remove most of that. You can see how misshapen this plant is, but I'm going to use that to my advantage, actually. I'm going to prune off these two larger limbs. Pruning, particularly at this time, will actually stimulate more growth. And I can dry these, use them in the kitchen, and by the time I've run out of this lot, these fresh ones will be ready to harvest. So I'm going to be quite brutal, I think. Come right in here. The second one, just going to come in again, quite tough. And I reckon I'll just take this tip out to even it up and encourage lots more new growth. Got to find a sunny spot for this. I hope you have a sunny few days in your garden.
Growing plants takes time and patience. It's a rewarding process, but do you ever wish you could wave a magic wand and speed things up a bit? Well, Clarence has uncovered a way to turn that dream into a big reality.
If you were going to do one thing to completely change the nature of your garden, what would it be? Maybe a chicken coop or a water feature. That sounds like a lot of work, and maybe you're a little bit too impatient. How about something like this? What an absolute beauty. This is a mature olive tree and in amazingly good shape, especially considering it lives in a bag. To learn more, I'm meeting third-generation nurseryman Paul Tachi from Exotic Nurseries and Landscaping. Paul, g'day.
G'day, Clarence. How you doing?
I've been checking out this olive tree. Where'd that come from?
Mate, it's from an old olive farm. It's about 25 years old and it's got some nice age and character to it. We saved that and then we'll get into a new garden. Let's jump in the car and I'll show you around.
I've come to meet Paul because I'm on the hunt for feature trees. Trees that would make an instant impact in the right garden. And because Paul's nursery specialises in just that kind of thing, I reckon I'm going to find them. Look at the size of this place. And I'm just so impressed with the quality of the stock. The plants are just absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah, quality is our main sort of priority.
I'm going to pick my top 5 feature trees that you could put in your garden tomorrow. And here's my first. The European fan palm, Chamaerops cumulus, also known as the Mediterranean fan palm. Now, this is a cold, hardy palm that is ideal for use in a temperate landscape. Will handle the cool conditions and look fantastic. This specimen's over 4 metres tall. It's in tremendous shape and it's another rescue. It's one thing to see so many large feature trees in the one place, but to know so many are rescued says a lot about the devotion of Paul's team. Rather than seeing those older trees get mulched up and taken out, you're able to actually keep them.
No, it's always good saving trees. You know, a lot of them go into new builds and it gives that big impact from day one, which is good.
Yeah. And despite the fact there's so many to choose from, some of these are just so impressive. I've just spotted, look at that, my next top 5 tree. Dracaena Draco, the dragon's blood tree. Straight out of the desert landscapes of western Morocco, this resilient plant will handle the harshest conditions, including salt-laden coastal areas. Now, it's perfect for that cliff-top getaway in Byron. Maybe one day. There's some amazing specimens here. So, Paul, some of these more mature trees, they've got to start at least 10K and up from there.
Yeah, mate, every bit of it. With the more mature stuff, sometimes they can be a lot more, but it depends on, you know, the first impact you want, especially with the dragon trees and that sort of gears. Like, they can increase the value of your home, and it's always good to invest in good landscaping, good plants, and especially if you want to resell the home or put it on the market, it's a good first impression.
But that's it, I suppose, you know, if you're going to spend $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 on an established tree,
yeah,
it is going to be a focal point if you're coming into a new space.
Definitely.
Next on the list is a dead set cracker. This incredible 2-metre giant is a native of Mexico, blue Nolina, Nolina nelsonii. And for me, it is the epitome of botanical grandeur. Absolutely eye-catching, particularly if you get too close, so be careful. Now, it will be beautifully offset if you use some rounded form in the bottom, things like casanets or cardboard palms, or even any rounded hedge. It is a stunning example of what you can do with a feature tree in your garden. If you're going to pot big plants, you're gonna need big pots. Look at the size of this thing.
She's big, isn't she?
Oh, I'll just step in like this, just away we go. Do they come much bigger than this?
Oh, they do, but this is 1,000 litre. We generally put our features in this size.
Getting the feature trees into them is part of the battle, but then keeping them in here and keeping them alive, like, there's a lot to it, I'm guessing.
Yeah, so we've got to, one, keep them upright, and two, we've got to keep them well watered, fed and that sort of thing.
And shaving that root ball to make it fit, you'd probably still need a little bit of space around the outside for some new growing media.
Yeah, so you always need to put new soil around the root ball, put some new fertiliser in that. So, yeah, but other than that, you know, they can survive in a pot for a long time.
Worst comes to worst, you can always just convert it into a little hot tub out the back.
Yeah, I'll grab you a beer.
That's perfect.
Yeah, that's it.
Speaking of relaxing, next, one of my personal tropical favourites, dwarf date palm, Phoenix robelenii. Revered for its size and its tropical feel. These guys get up around 2 metres tall, and they look absolutely lush from every angle. It's a native to southeastern Asia, and it's just perfect for laying back in a banana lounge, speedos on, sipping cocktails. Oh, I can just picture it now. The dwarf date palm. So from dream to reality, how does one of these massive trees get into your backyard? Given the investment and the cost of these trees, the last thing you want is to damage them or break a limb off. What does it take to get one of these feature trees out of the nursery and into somebody's garden?
Look, it all comes down to access. Tight access, streets, neighbours, power poles, it just depends. And you don't want to damage it, of course. Yeah, so it's a bit of a challenge sometimes.
Some of these pots may not be able to, it's not a simple method of just tapping them out.
No, not at all, not at all, no. It takes a good landscape, and it's important to use a landscape professional to do it.
My biggest problem is I have to find my final tree for my top 5. And now it's getting really difficult. Is it this magnificent Alexandrian Barbary or tree aloe with its spectacular silhouette and smooth grey trunk? Africa's largest aloe? Or will it be this? Pandanus pedunculatus, also known as coastal screw pine. Both impressive and easy to look after. In the end, I couldn't go past this native stunner. This is a Queensland bottle tree, Brachiochiton rupestris. This majestic native looks great with an understory of cacti or succulents. Now, as the name suggests, it does form the shape of a bottle as it matures, and like a camel, will store water. It's a native from Queensland, although it does handle up to -8 degrees. This is definitely in my top 5. A mature feature tree is a big investment. But for instant gratification, a tree can completely change how you use your garden. It also makes you think about your established trees and the value they bring to your quality of life.
My favourite plant is probably silver birches, just the bark and the colouring of it and and I like seeing it change through the seasons, which is really nice.
My favourite tree, Stenocarpus sinuatus, the Queensland firewheel tree. Well, it's just a fabulous wheel flower. It flowers very prolifically. Not that long, I suppose, but it's just a wonderful tree.
Jade plant, that they call it money plant. Yeah, they said, yeah, if you have that at your home, it's a blessing.
At the moment, my favourite is the tomato plant because I haven't perfected growing one and I haven't beaten the wildlife yet to an actual tomato.
I love Sansevierias, sort of like the mother-in-law's tongue ones. They really like sculptural and architectural, and I just love how hardy they are. Just like really resilient, great indoor plants.
I've got a new favourite, and it's the nude shot coria that we have. So native, it's got like a purpley foliage colour, but still got that very authentic Australian coria look, and it's stunning.
I got a nice jacaranda tree in the corner of the backyard. In the afternoon, it's nice to sit underneath the, canopy and have a cup of tea and read my garden magazines. It gives me immense pleasure.
I love artists who work with plants, observing and interpreting the beauty of the natural world around them. Our next story is with an artist putting things together with serious visual impact.
Almost every element is a separate photograph that I've taken. When I capture these elements in the bush, I come back, I load them onto my computer. I will deep etch, which means getting rid of all the background, and just save the bit of the image that I want to keep. I layer, I rearrange, I create the shadows. Some of my artworks will have over 300 layers. When people first see my work, they assume that it is a painting. But then when they get up really close, they realize that it would be very difficult to paint in such detail. I really wanted to focus on strictly Australian natives. I wanted to celebrate what we do have and protect what we're losing. My name is Pamela Pauline, and I'm a photographic artist. I'm originally from Wyoming in the United States, a small town called Laramie. I grew up in a high, dry climate. There's some beautiful wildflowers in Wyoming, incredibly beautiful mountains and beautiful trees and that sort of thing. I live on the northern beaches of Sydney. I absolutely love this area. I've had people tell me that they find bushwalking in Australia really boring because there aren't as many big, glamorous flowers. I find it so not boring because I think I love the challenge of finding these little species. Homoranthus variety of plants really took me by surprise because they're absolutely minuscule. You know, we've got the flannel flower that's so furry, like flannel. The Grevillea scapigera is from Western Australia. I use that word awe and almost disbelief that it could be so beautiful and so unnoticed sometimes. We've got over 24,000 species in Australia, and about 1,400 of them are actually threatened with extinction, so that's quite a big percentage. The ideas sort of developed in my mind, how could I photograph these species, draw awareness, and then create something that was actually beautiful to look at? So it really made sense for me to look back at some of the old master artists and see what did they do with their floral bouquets. To me, it didn't feel complete with just the flora, so I thought, well, I'm going to incorporate threatened birds as well. And then I thought, well, people just looking at it initially won't recognize that these are threatened, so I incorporated some books. I've got an hourglass in a lot of my works that sort of shows that time could be running out if we don't all do our collective responsibility to save these plants and animals. I really wanted to use soft and quite dark lighting for these pictures because I wanted them to be quite dramatic. Having said that, I wanted other work to not be quite so daunting. So I thought, let me start working on some pieces that are a bit more uplifting, maybe with flora and birds that are more everyday, more extraordinary, things that we do see. So that's why the newer ones are brighter. It might be that just the birds are threatened amongst the other beautiful flora. It's very important in my work that I tread lightly. So I spend a lot of time in the bush photographing, and I would say probably 80% of elements that I'm working with in an artwork are from the bush, and they're still in the bush. Obviously, when I find something that's irresistible in a flower shop that's native, I will buy it and photograph it. But that's rare. Most of it comes from the bush and stays in the bush, and that means a lot to me, that it'll eventually decay and it'll regenerate for someone else to witness. I have so many photographs of plants and birds, probably 37,000, something like that. For me, I wouldn't find joy in using someone else's work. When I'm editing, I actually remember where I was, what the weather was like, and it's all part of the process. It's what sort of completes my work for me. And over time, it comes together, and then I'll think it's nearly done, and then I'll think, no, I need a bee. So then I'll be out looking for bees. Yeah, you could go on forever and the artwork would never be finished. At some point, I just have to say, enough is enough. I'm happy. I have a lot of people who tear up when they see these works. It goes back to people's homes, and they talk about it, and they say, oh, can you believe that this is actually endangered now? We're in a biodiversity crisis. So I think there are little subtle ways you can spread awareness. I want to do it in a way that is positive. It showcases the beauty. The beauty is very real to me.
The time has arrived. Flex your muscles, bend those elbows. Here's your jobs for the weekend. In cool temperate gardens, it's the perfect time to plant thyme. Tasty, versatile and tough as boots, thyme is an excellent plant for veggie patch borders, dry spots and pots. Mix it up. There's loads of different varieties to choose from. Summer stunners in the cottage garden, gladioli corms are ready to go in. Plant in a sunny spot at the back of a garden bed, and in a couple of months, you'll be glad you did. Silver beet seeds can be sown now. Soak in water overnight and sow direct, leaving about 30 centimetres between plants. A good feed with aged chook poo will see these boom. Warm temperate gardeners, if your strawberries are looking sad after winter, give them a boost with regular week applications of liquid fertiliser and lay some fresh straw mulch to keep forming fruit off the soil. They can feel like they bloom forever, but impatiens will benefit from a spruce up this spring. Cut them back to the ground, remove rotted segments and top dress with aged manure or compost. While the secateurs are out, remove spent flowers from winter blooming natives like callistemon and hakea to tidy them up and stop them wasting energy producing seed. Subtropical lawn lovers, raise the cutting heights of your mowers. Longer lawn provides shade for soil, making it more heat tolerant and less likely to be smashed by summer. High-yielding lovers of heat and humidity, snake beans can be planted now. Find a sunny spot and give them something to climb and you'll be picking plump pods in no time. Give flowering faves like Duranta, Alamander and Mussaenda a trim and tidy, some organic fertiliser and a good drink, and they'll reward you with a stunning summer show. Sow seeds of Darwin lettuce, an oak leaf variety that thrives in the tropics and is slow to bolt to seed. Protect them from ravenous snails and slugs, particularly when young. It's a ripper time to get in a fresh round of basil and sweet corn, as well as perennial edibles including taro, lemongrass, sweet potato and Cape gooseberry. If you're netting fruit trees, use taut hailguard mesh or wildlife-friendly netting to ensure flying foxes cannot become tangled. Remember, loose netting or anything with holes wide enough to stick your pinky through is a danger. Arid gardeners, limited space at your place? Sow a Three Sisters combination of corn, beans and melon. The corn provides a trellis for the beans, and the melon spreads at ground level, suppressing weeds and providing a living mulch. Need more colour in your life? Take tip cuttings of brachyscomes and scaevola, pop into free-draining potting mix, sit them in a sheltered spot, and plant out once established for a stunning summer show. Before the heat really hits, it's time to get mulching. Use deep layers of straw mulches for edibles, a coarse gravel for natives, and a chunky wood chip for ornamental plantings. There's heaps happening in our gardens and so much to get stuck into. But if you need even more inspiration, head to the Gardening Australia YouTube channel for heaps of tips, tricks, and top gardening info. Well, it's time to blow the siren on another week, but we've got plenty in store for next time. Let's take a look.
Spring is such an exciting time of the year. There's so many flowers, lots of fragrance, and of course food to harvest. But it's also a great time to get planting. And I'm going to show you what to get in the ground now for the weeks, months, and year ahead.
I'm going to show you a new development in the fight against the most notorious Queenslander of all time.
They have an estimated population of about 2 billion cane toads.
Cane toads? Yuck.
This garden is a treasure trove of rare and unusual plants, from beautiful flowering bulbs to tiny alpines and heat-loving perennials. It's a garden that I can't wait to show you.